These are in listen-only mode.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our top 5 tips to increase EHR user adoption and utilization. Guest speaker Lezlie Osborn. Before we begin, let's advance to the next slide and talk a little bit about the technology today. Your lines have been muted for the duration of the webinar, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time through your chat box. You can slide that open and shut using the double arrow or orange arrow on your screen. Now, a little bit about today's speaker. Lezlie Osborn is a veteran educational professional at Teksoft Ventures. She possesses over a decade worth of training experience and extensive knowledge in the software education space, which is what we're talking about today. Recent highlights include an SAP education project with over 600 users and a WMS rollout utilizing Manhattan Associates software. She has a great background today in our brief 20-minute webinar. And with that, Lezlie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. We are going to discuss 5 of probably many ways to increase EHR user adoption and utilization today. And I've just chosen these 5. And the first one is understanding user challenges, identifying the needs and the pains. If you can't verbalize what you want and what needs to be fixed, how are you going to get it? Your EHR absolutely should be able to provide or prove your company's meaningful use. There should be no excuses. Demand that. Number 3, better documentation proves your patient care in the present and the future and provides the data necessary to make levels on many, many different levels of the organization. Number 4, targeted customized documentation. When users know their software, when they really know it, the happiness barometer is high, and we all know what that means in any organization, right? And then the number 5 tip is users learn best from educators who are knowledgeable, not just present in the classroom. So those are our 5 touch points, and we'll go ahead and get started. I want to point out that today's webinar's information has actually been extracted from a recent case study. And so the first point, we're talking about understanding needs and pains, okay? So sometimes looking at your problems can be can be hard to do. This case study is actually taken from a large hospital chain that had implemented a new EDIS system, EDIS being Emergency Department Information System. And as a standard training strategy, the implementer provided training to super users, and then the super users were supposed to go ahead and train the masses, okay? And again, I say that that's pretty standard. But what happened in this particular case, which I don't think is an anomaly, is that the needs and pains were recognized on 2 levels almost instantly. There's a C-suite level, and then there's actually the ED nurse or the provider level. So what were the needs of the C-suite? Reporting, quality and compliance, revenue recognition, meaningful use. They weren't being met. What were the needs of the ED nurses and providers? Documentation abilities, their quality and compliance, patient charting. And if all of those are not quite right, then handoff of care is very difficult for patients that are dispositioned as transfers or admits. So the pain for the C-suite was the documentation wasn't complete at the provider level, so the reporting was poor. Billing was poor. Revenue recognition was dropping, and the statistics were just a mess. The pain for the ED nurses and providers was they didn't have a full understanding of the system that they were working with. They were frustrated. They wanted their old system back. They were putting information where it didn't belong in the system. And the number 1 complaint of the providers is, we are good nurses. Our patients matter to us, but this system is not allowing us to say that. So this company decided that they needed to do refresher education. They didn't have time for the nurses to figure this out on their own, and workarounds were mounting, frustration was mounting, and again, statistics and numbers were dropping. What's important to remember is that when you miss your major needs, you do have major pains. Okay? Complete integrated patient data. If your charts aren't complete, everything is going to be affected. Accurate data reporting is important for patient disposition types, for revenue recognition, for trending and forecasting, and for marketing. If healthcare providers are not completely aware of the correct usage of their software, the repercussion of their data pain is going to be felt by everybody: staff management, accounting, marketing, and even the board. And the major need of meaningful use means that this organization was not meeting their Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement levels. And that's a major pain indeed, because we all know that that's what EHRs are being used for. So this organization recognized their needs and wanted to focus on relieving the pain. They wanted education that was going to focus on better patient care documentation. They wanted education that was going to help the nurses and providers document more accurate ED procedures. Because in the ED, there are lots of different procedures that take place. And there were nurses that said, you know what? Every time somebody comes in with a head injury, I do this and this and this and this. But I haven't been clicking those little check boxes in the chart. So that means my documentation is incorrect, right? Oh, and that means that billing is incorrect, right? Oh, and that means reporting is incorrect, right? So they understood the repercussions of their data entry. This organization also wanted education to focus on the completion of orders and tasks and the patient procedures. Big pain point: IV stop times, medication follow-up. These are integral timestamps that are necessary in a patient chart. And if they aren't showing up, it shows negligent patient care, and that's a big loss of revenue. So these were the needs that the education was supposed to satisfy the pain for. The refresher training was actually done like all education should be done for adults, hands-on. That's how we learn. That's how we learn best. How about that? So a training system was actually created in the EDIS system. So that means that these healthcare providers did not have to interrupt production. They didn't have to put in false data and then remove it. They had their own sandbox, if you want to call it, a playground, whatever your term is, where they could learn how to do these new concepts and then see the repercussions of their data entry. This healthcare organization really hasn't ever adopted education before, so this was very new for them. So they wanted proof that education was viable. So pre and post assessments were done on the education. And that was administered using a web survey tool. And then also sustainment materials were left behind. And that was done because in the classroom, step-by-step exercises were just done verbally, because that's how life happens. But those step-by-step exercises were actually left behind in written form, and a manual was created and left behind at every ED. And that allowed these users to actually have reference materials, and also gave them the ability to train new users that might come to work in their ED. This healthcare organization also wanted to know, how satisfied are our users with their software? I mean, just really, what do they think of this software? So we again asked the question pre and post education. What do you think of your software? How satisfied are you? And we ended up with 3 blocks of users. Those that are satisfied, those that are dissatisfied, and then you always have your complacent, I don't want to answer truly people, right? So as you can see in the gray columns, that's our pre-education numbers. The red columns are the post-education numbers. And I'd like to call your attention to the complacent columns. you can see a difference of over 9% pre and post, a drop in complacency. There was also a drop in software dissatisfaction post-education of almost 9%. And we see both of those numbers dropping right on top of the red column for software satisfaction. And there was an increase of almost 18% post-education. And I think that's really significant. That proves user adoption and utilization is going to increase when 18% of your users are like, yeah, I get this. I like this. Because that's 18% of positive emotions that you have about the software that are going to eke out into everybody else also. When you educate, remember these facts. Users say, don't waste my time. Be organized. Manage the time. I have a job to do. I have a life to live. After this education of this, in this case study, participants said this class was at a good pace, a good length, and good information was gained. They also said it was great to have an instructor who understood the subject matter and stayed on course. Again, be organized. Manage the time. Users say, be knowledgeable, please. Be able to answer my questions. Be able to engage me in a scenario. Be able to talk to me about a day in my life and how I would use this software system to do that. After the education, some users said the instructor's knowledge of the system and how to use it was very beneficial. And one user actually said, I learned more in 4 hours than I did in 2 days of super user training. Users also say, respect me, create a safe learning environment, and let me try this new stuff that you're talking to me about. And they said the hands-on practice on these computers using a training environment that looks just like what we do every day was a big advantage. You weren't just talking to me and I had these words rolling around in my head and ideas that I should try. I got to do it. I got to see what it did. And the small classroom groups allowed for interactive questions and answers. And what that really did was provide for some great conversations of, remember when, you know, this happened, and they could talk about how the software to actually document it better the next time around. And users say, make education apply to me. What's in it for me? How does this make me better? How does this improve my day? And users after this education said, yeah, I learned stuff I never knew. I know I'm going to be a better documenter now. I know I'm going to be able to say, this is exactly what I did for my patient, and everybody all the way up to the C-suite level is going to be able to see that and report on that and bill on that. So this is just a little saying for you to tuck away. And I want to give you this analogy. Remember years ago when you first got your smartphone? You're so excited and you're using this touch screen and you enter all your contacts and you're talking on this and then pretty soon you learn, oh man, look how I can just take pictures, and then you learn some more. Oh, Instagram, look at how I can make my pictures better and I can post them here and throw them there. And you learn that you can Google things, and then all of a sudden you figure out, oh, I can just talk to Siri. I don't even have to type anything. She'll find out stuff for me. So your education is always moving forward. And when you know better, you do better. Let's go ahead and wrap up this case study. Remember we talked about the pre- and post-assessment scores? Well, education was delivered at 69 sites, and the average score was 78% pre-assessment. The average score for post-assessment was 94%. So there was transfer of knowledge of an increase of 16% across the board. One user actually said, I liked the pre-assessment. It helped me identify where I was lacking where I needed to focus, what I needed to become better at. So before the education even started, they had an idea of what do I really need to be focusing on here. This healthcare organization, remember, we've talked about education isn't something that they didn't really know if they believed in or needed. Also wanted to ask the question pre and post education of their users. How often do you want to be educated? Do you think it's important? Is it necessary? And what we found was very interesting, and that is pre and post, 82% of users said, give us information annually. Tell us what's changed. Tell us what we need to do better. Tell us, what's missing. But then they added a caveat, the users did, and they said, but also let us tell you what we need, what we would like to see, what we could use in this software. So that was an interesting addition. But users want to be educated. They want to know better so they can do better. So to recap our top 5 tips, identify your needs and your pains. If you can identify them, then you can fix them. And when needs are met and pains are fixed, users are going to be happier, so adoption increases and utilization increases. It just makes sense. Major needs such as meaningful use should be fully attained. Do not give any excuses to your EHR system in that regard. So if that need isn't being met, the healthcare providers, the C-suite level, everybody knows it, and then that's a pain for everybody. But when you figure it out, adoption and utilization will increase. Educated, informed healthcare personnel just create better quality documentation. Coming back to when you know better, you do better. Very, very competitive and very, very proud people in the healthcare industry. They want to do the best they can do. When users understand their software, everything improves. And I think we all just know that as managers, as trainers, that when everything's going right, everything is getting better. And I think you probably all know that users learn from knowledgeable professional educators. You are a user. Who do you learn best from? Your users are the same way. They want the same things that you do in an educational environment so that they can utilize the tools they've been given better. I have been talking for quite a while now, and I hope I have shared some information that is viable to you in your organization. And now it is time for your questions.
Thank you, Lezlie, and several questions have come in. While we do this, we're going to launch a confidential survey if somebody would like a copy of the PowerPoint slides, a conference call, etc. on this information. Please respond to the poll. The first question that has come in, if you were to rank your tips, which one is number 1 to you and why?
Well, I would say number 1 is recognize your needs and just start throwing Band-Aids on things. Really, really understand what are we needing this system to do, what are we not getting out of this system, and then demanding some way, somehow, that those needs are met.
Several more questions have come in about the testing. I'll try to put these together. How often do you recommend companies test, and how important do you actually think it is to do so?
You know, as an educator, I think testing is important because I think learners like to know that they're getting better. I think for the most part, users do want to do better, and education allows them that opportunity, and they celebrate their wins. So just to go into an education just blind and just attend this and, okay, here's your certificate, thanks for being here, you're done, here's your participation ribbon. I think they feel pride in what they're doing if they're allowed an assessment.
Very good, and we have time for another question. And two people have asked about the role of the super users that you mentioned in your training. Essentially, what happened with the role of the super users after the second round of education at this company with the information that was provided?
I would assume that the super user continues to be just that, because the super user was chosen because they are an avid learner and they are obviously a leader in their organization or in their department. So with the new information that was given to them in the refresher training, they were only going to continue to get more and more information, because that's just that person's personality.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation and the Q&A. We appreciate it. For all the attendees today, and it was an extensive audience, look for additional webinars on training, education, tools, adoption from the people at Teksoft Ventures. We'll have one approximately every month. These are open webinars. We encourage you to check back each month for a new topic. With that, this web seminar is now ending. We thank our presenter today, Lezlie, and we thank all of you. Please have a great day.